Some time ago, two unusual comments appeared under two of our videos. We received the first one from user Steve66203. The issue was whether we would undertake an analysis of the plot of GTA San Andreas in terms of whether Frank Tenpenny was working for Mike Toreno. At first, we were quite skeptical about this comment, but after a while, we thought that looking for clues on this topic could be quite interesting. The second comment comes from user Lao the Impaler 4686, who asked us why CJ didn't decide to ask Woozie for help in getting rid of Tenpenny, possibly even earlier in the story. And once again, we were faced with a simple question in theory, the answer to which in practice is much more complex than it might seem. So we'll start with the first question, which is whether Frank Tenpenny worked for Mike Toreno. Generally speaking, we can answer this question in several ways, looking at everything not necessarily from the point of view of the storyline. Someone could say that Tenpenny worked for Toreno because Mike is much higher in the hierarchy of justice than Frank. It's worth recalling that Mike Toreno is a CIA agent, which, like the FBI or the DEA, deals with much more serious investigations than the local police in Los Santos. Yes, each police unit solves more or less complex cases, but in the case of problems of state importance, it is secondary authority, while government agencies are mainly involved. So given that the police are, in a sense, subordinate to government agencies, theoretically, someone could say that Tenpenny works for Toreno, who could be his superior, but he would not give him orders directly. Assuming such a possibility, Tenpenny could carry out assignments without even knowing of Mike's existence. On the other hand, the argument that indicates a negative answer regarding Tenpenny's work for Toreno is Contra's organization thread, which we talked about in more detail in another episode, which you must see after this video. The video is currently shown in the tab in the upper right corner of the screen. By the way, we highly recommend it to you. Anyway, the CIA's work on behalf of the Contras took place on two levels. The first was to cause a crack epidemic in Los Angeles and Miami, among others. The transport and purchase of drugs were done for one purpose, namely to raise funds to finance the activities of the Contras guerrilla organization. The second element was the transfer of firearms to soldiers, which was done using freight trains. These trains carried all the necessary equipment. This equipment went to ports in the United States, from where it was transported directly to Nicaragua. But that's in a nutshell. More on this topic, as we mentioned earlier, can be found in the episode about Contras. Coming back, at this point we have, in a sense, a clash of two contradictions. On the one hand, Frank Tenpenny persuades Big Smoke to start obtaining drugs from the local syndicate, which is a good thing when it comes to supporting the Contras organization. But on the other hand, he tells all the gangs in the city about the freight train, which, after all, is helping this organization. It's hard for us to say if Tenpenny has mixed feelings about the Contras organization, but we'd be more inclined to say that he had little interest in it.
Mendez! Now listen, that was a buyer. We gotta step up production. We're not thinking big enough here, okay? My connections in Panama can get us all the product we need, untouched.
I knew that fat fuck would see it our way.
Yeah, always do once they understand the choices we're offering.
There's a train gonna make an unscheduled stop just down the way. It's got a, how you say, little something something on board for you boys.
Here we go. That's our train, all right. Shit, look like some Northside Vagos got it first.
What's this? We got ballers trying to crash the party?
Look like Tenpenny told every gang in South Central.
Man, we gonna smoke those baller assholes.
It's true that by supporting drugs, the man will be helping the Contras, but Tenpenny is probably more interested in helping the gangs, especially the ballers. If Tenpenny makes the gangs richer thanks to him, he'll automatically gain from it. So if Tenpenny was working for Toreno, he certainly wouldn't have tipped off the gangs about a freight train to support the Contras guerrillas. The CIA and Toreno himself wouldn't allow that. In short, the mission Catalyst would not have happened. However, to further show you that Tenpenny could not work for Toreno, we would like to draw your attention to a certain detail. If we assume purely theoretically that Tenpenny did work for Toreno, then the High Noon mission, where Tenpenny wanted to get rid of CJ, should also not have a right to exist.
And I'll see you in the next life, Carl.
Note that Carl Johnson has been working for Toreno for a couple of weeks now, doing quite serious tasks for him. The CIA agent sees the potential of CJ, so he will not allow anyone to kill him under any circumstances. If Tenpenny was working for Mike Toreno, he can have tried to kill CJ against Mike's will. We're pretty sure Toreno would have given Tenpenny instructions that he can continue using CJ, but under no circumstances must he be killed. So CJ was free to do whatever Tenpenny wanted, as long as it didn't jeopardize the CIA's Contra business. So summarizing this part of the episode, we can clearly say that Tenpenny did not work for Mike Toreno. Yes, if we look at the whole situation from the perspective that Toreno is someone more influential, then in theory, he is above Tenpenny and his boss. So Frank could unknowingly follow Mike's orders if he received them from his superior. However, given that Tenpenny wasn't exactly useful to Toreno due to his obstruction of firearm shipments to the Contras, we sincerely doubt that Tenpenny was working directly for him. We have reached the end of this part of the video, and therefore we would like to invite you to the Community tab, where you will be asked if you agree with our point of view. If not, feel free to write why you think otherwise. In the meantime, we're moving on to part 2 of today's episode, where we'll give you our insights on why CJ did not ask Woozie to help him get Tenpenny. In general, the reference to Woozie does make sense. That's because this question immediately reminds us of the mission Jizzy, taken from CJ's workshop in Doherty. As you may remember, in the photo opportunity mission, CJ took photos of the members of the Loco Syndicate. But since the man is unfamiliar with the criminal underworld of San Fierro, in the mission Jizzy, Carl and Caesar ask Woozie to tell them something more about the unknown faces. Of course, Woozie doesn't tell us anything in the end, and one of his subordinates speaks about it, which is, of course, related to Woozie's blindness. Which, by the way, some people deny what we talked about in the video, the thumbnail of which you can see now on the screen. If you're interested in this topic, then take a look at this episode next out. Just like the previous video, you also have this displayed in the tab.
Putas, Holmes.
Why don't you go take a look?
These guys?
Yeah.
They're the Loco Syndicate. They're pretty big time, I think. Don't have any dealings with them. We don't touch blow. Now this guy runs things. I don't know his name. This guy is T-Bone Mendez. He's the muscle.
And who's that guy?
That's Jizzy B. He's the biggest pimp in town. He helps set up the deals. You know, concierge of sorts.
Coming back to the point, it was Woozie who pretty much helped CJ take care of the Loco Syndicate, and it wasn't just visible in the mission Jizzy. We saw Woozie's help primarily in the Pier 69 mission, as well as in Toreno's Last Flight and Yeka Boom Boom. Another example showing a situation where Woozie helps CJ is the mission A Home in the Hills. CJ plans to return to Los Santos with a big bang, and the main character's first goal is to recapture Mad Dog's villa from the Vagos. Woozie had no obligation to help CJ, and best of all, during the cutscene, there are no signs that CJ asked him for help. In the end, it looks like Woozie wants to help Carl of his own free will. And after these two situations, we come to the point where CJ still has Tenpenny on his mind, the man who wants to continue using CJ for his purposes. It's worth noting that in the San Fierro stage of the storyline, CJ already knows Woozie and even had the opportunity to use his help, as we said a moment ago. So why doesn't CJ want to ask Woozie for help? Well, there are several reasons for that. The first and probably most important reason for this turn of events is that CJ had no one to cover for him, especially regarding the Pendlebury murder that Tenpenny framed CJ for.
Well, what do we got here?
This is a weapon, Officer Pulaski, that was used to gun down a police officer not 10 minutes ago. Officer Pendlebury, a fine man, I might add. You work fast, nigga.
You know I just got off the plane.
Well, that's a good thing we found you and retrieved the murder weapon.
That ain't my gun.
Don't bullshit me, Carl.
Yeah, don't bullshit him, Carl.
What the fuck you want from me this time?
When we want you, we'll find you.
Tenpenny told his men that if anything happened to him, it would probably be CJ's fault. Therefore, if Carl had killed Tenpenny, the police would have easily linked CJ to that murder and the death of Officer Pendlebury, for which Tenpenny had prepared an extensive dossier. Another problem is that Tenpenny, metaphorically speaking, keeps the keys to Sweet's cell in his pocket. The man himself told CJ at the end of the mission, the Green Saber, that if he was up to something, he could have Sweet move to the Ballas block at any time.
Right, Carl?
Yeah, by any means necessary.
Now you stay the fuck away from Smoke and stay the fuck away from us. Otherwise, Sweet's gonna find himself on a Ballas block getting in touch with his feminine side.
Needless to say, CJ would have to kill not only Tenpenny, but also Pulaski and Hernandez, who might as make trouble. The whole thing would just be too risky. Certainly not worth the effort at the moment. Now, let's imagine that CJ asks Woozie for help, and in the end, the plan didn't work out. The entire triad, including CJ, will be seriously screwed because not only are the Chinese currently on beef with the Da Nang boys, but the police will also come to this. We suspect here that CJ was well aware of this risk and therefore did not dare to ask for help. And the second reason, which is related to the first one while specifically talking about the San Fierro stage, is that CJ may have thought that Woozie would refuse to help him. The men have known each other for some time. CJ and Woozie had been racing for fun in the countryside, but CJ hadn't done much for Woozie yet. The man doesn't owe him any debts of gratitude. He may have taken a liking to CJ, but he's just an acquaintance to him, and their friendship is just beginning to develop. Also, even if we go a step further and ask why CJ didn't ask Woozie for help later in the story, the answer will be based on the same, namely that it would be too risky for Woozie. In short, in the event of a failure of the Triad's action, the police would start to mess up a lot, threatening the interests of this organization, and Sweet could simply not survive. Besides, after the High Noon mission, Tenpenny disappears without a trace, so theoretically, there would be nothing to talk about. Furthermore, there's also the case of Mike Toreno, who promises CJ that if he helps the CIA, he can count on help in terms of releasing Sweet from jail over time. So in addition to what we've said, it's worth noting that at this stage, it would be completely unjustified to organize an attack on Tenpenny. In conclusion, there are solid reasons why CJ decided not to ask Woozie for help in getting rid of Tenpenny. Killing an officer with such connections, who also had leverage over CJ, was simply too much of a risk that wasn't taken, and rightly so in our opinion. Be sure to let us know what you think about these two topics. Do you agree with us, or do you have a completely different opinion? We're waiting for your comments. Meanwhile, that would be all for today. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Goodbye!